Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started for this session on ensuring accessibility. I'm Jennifer Culver. I am the Senior ATSD for the Simmons School of Education and the manager of our online production services. And with me are Masumi, who is the ATSD for Meadows, and Jennifer Jordan, who's part of the online production services team. And we wanted to talk to you today a little bit about accessibility and some easy ways to make sure that your courses are available to all students who take them. So the things that we're going to talk about today, we're going to start with some of the topics that are requested most often in terms of accommodations, and that would be extended time on assignments or quizzes and extended attempts or multiple attempts on assignments or quizzes. And after we move out of that phase, because that will be pretty quick, there's Canvas has done some really positive things in that direction. After that, we're going to move into some pieces about color and media and images that can help us as we start building and designing our courses to make sure that all of our students can see it, can access it, and can benefit from it. But first, we're going to start with that extended time and extra attempts, because that is one of the big ones. So if you have a student who has an accommodation from DAS that asks for extended time on a test or more than one attempt, all you have to do is go to quizzes, and right in the top right-hand corner, I'll show this to you in just a little bit when we get into Canvas, you'll see moderate this quiz. And when you click on it, you'll see all of your students' names, and you're going to click the name of the student that you want to provide this accommodation for. And here in this box is where you'll be able to add whatever it is you want to add. You can add extra minutes, or you can add extra attempts. And because you're adding it here in this one student extension box, you're not adding it for the whole class. You're only adding it for that student. So the rest of the setup of the course stays the same and stays the way that you attempted it. Again, we're going to get into Canvas in a little bit, and I will show it to you then. But now that we have this moderate quiz page, it's very easy to provide those pieces. Now, the extended time piece on a quiz only applies if you have a time limit on the quiz. And if you don't have a time limit on the quiz, then you won't see that extra time on every attempt box show up in student extensions because you haven't limited anyone by time. But I do want you to think about, as you're building quizzes, that if you are intending for your quiz to be taken during class, for example, or in a certain period of time, if you have a student who needs that extra time, you're still going to have to set up the time limits in that quiz so that your students who need extra time can get it. We can't just close the quiz at the end of the class period if you have someone who needs extra time. So that part, if you don't see that box about extra time, then that's because you don't have a time limit on the quiz. The other note about this that can kind of cause a little bit of confusion sometimes is right here. I've set a quiz for 90 minutes, and Canvas tells me everybody already gets 90 minutes. How many extra minutes do I want to give this student? So if this student gets twice the amount of time as normal, then I'm not going to put 180 minutes here because the student already has 90. I'm going to put another 90 minutes here because it's extra time, not the total amount of time. And so that has caused a little bit of confusion, and I want to bring that to your attention as well. If the student gets extra attempts, you can also make it so that you go in and unlock the quiz for that second attempt. That's really helpful if, for example, you want to make sure that that student meets with you and you talk to that student before that second attempt is tried. You can say, yes, you still have an attempt, but I'd like you to talk to me about this quiz before you take it. Now we're going to move into some of the content choices and things to think about as you're building courses. And if you're building a course for a virtual setting, or if you are having more of a Canvas presence in your SMU Flex courses, there are some good things to keep in mind. And the first one is about color. You can see here on the left-hand side that we've got bad color combinations and good color combinations. And color contrast is something that can really, really affect a student's ability to understand information on a page. And as you can see in these 4 boxes, there's really only one box that shows a good color contrast. A lot of times, if it feels like your eyes are straining to read the words or straining to see what some of the words are, then your color contrast may not be as strong as it needs to be. We really want a very, very stark contrast of color, a really light background and a really dark text, or a really dark text and a really light background. And I said the same thing twice. Or a really dark background and a very light text. Either way is perfectly fine, but we really need to see that harsh contrast, and I will show you some places that you can check your colors on. The other one over here is the red-green color contrast issue, and we have a surprising number of the population who cannot differentiate and see the number inside of this circle. Best practices in accessibility when it comes to color come to 2 things. One is that the color contrast is readable, but the other is that when you are differentiating information on a page, that color is not the only way that you're setting this information apart on the page. And part of the reason for that comes with these issues that you see here, the issues of contrast and the issues of recognition. So if you're wanting to separate out information, you can still use color to do that, but you can't only use color to do that in best practices. You've also done something else to set that apart. Did you bold it? Did you underline it? What else could you do to show that this information is significant so color isn't the only way that we can pick this up?
Hi, Jennifer.
Yeah.
This is Julie. Yeah, I think Kathy Hayes has a question.
Sure. Let me pull it up and see. I'm not seeing it because PowerPoint is up. What was the question, Masumi?
I think Kathy Hayes raised her hand.
What?
Do you have a question, Kathy? And Nishiki raised her hand as well.
Yes, sure. Oh, the screen for some reason stopped sharing. That's what part of it is.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Here we go. Let me try it again. It stopped at one point and I saw everybody again.
Yeah, it's showing now.
Yeah, it's going again. Okay, that was strange. It was a weird flip. Thank you for letting us know. Let me go back and show you those color pieces. So you can see the good color contrast and the bad ones that were over here. A lot of times you can really tell just from your eye strain alone that there's a color contrast issue when you're seeing it. The next thing that we wanted to look at was media. And best practices in accessibility, again for media, include that you provide captions and or transcripts of video so that students can be able to read if they need to be able to read to gain that information or to gain that content. So one of the nice things that we have about our current video repository system, which is Panopto, is that in Panopto, we can put in a video and Panopto will create auto-generated captions. And auto-generated captions in Panopto, like in YouTube and all sorts of other places. They're not 100%, but they're pretty close. We just need then to go in and edit them in certain places. And in editing, we can click right here into the line of captions and edit the captions directly and then save them. We also can download the caption file and do a little bit of cleaning up and turn those into transcripts. So we can have both available. SMU is a Quality Matters campus for online instruction, and Quality Matters says for accessibility either one or the other. And but typically we tend to try to provide both when we can provide both. Even your Zoom sessions that you have with your students, your live Zoom sessions with your students, if you put those into Panopto, Panopto will create captions for those as well. So you don't have to create these things really, you just have to do a little bit of cleanup on the other end of it. Then we come to use of images, and accessibility standards differentiate between an informative image and a decorative image. An informative image is conveying a piece of content that the student needs to have in order to gain the full understanding of what's going on. And a decorative image really is just a decorative image. Best practices in accessibility would say that we will identify what kinds of images we're using as we're building, and I'm going to be showing you how to do that very, very quickly and easily. And if it's a decorative image, all we have to do is say, this is a decorative image. And if it's an informative image, then we do a little bit more. We do a little bit of explaining what it is. And this is for our visually impaired students. And again, we want them to be gaining the same amount of content as anyone else. And so that means that if an image is the only thing that's conveying a certain piece of content, then we're doing some explaining that a screen reader or some other tools could pick up so that the student can still get the necessary information. But then when it came across this picture of a dog, for example, it will just skip over it because the picture of the dog isn't really necessary towards gaining content. Then we come into tables and charts and pieces like that. This is another place where best practices encourage us, if we're going to be presenting in something like PowerPoint, that we do the building of the table or the creation of the chart or the graphic inside PowerPoint as much as possible, because then we can make it accessible. So the table on the left, I built inside PowerPoint. A screen reader could then read all of those top lines as headings and the bottom lines as information. But the image on the right is just a screenshot, and because of that, PowerPoint and screen readers don't know what that is at all. So if I put everything together, the next big question is, how do I check and see if my documents are accessible or not? Or I've put my slides together, I have my session coming up soon. How can I make sure that this is the best set of information for students and I've made things as accessible as possible? A lot of the tools that we use regularly have built-in accessibility checkers, and that's what I'm about to get in and show you now. Microsoft products have those, the Adobe products have them, Canvas even has them as well. And then we have outside tools like WebAIM, who has a really, really good accessibility checker, and Wave, which can check the accessibility of websites. Because depending on the issue that your student has, if you're sending the students out to certain websites, we also need to try to make sure that those websites can be accessible to them as well, if that's the only way that students are getting content. Universal design encourages us to create content in multiple ways for students so that those students can find the right ways to get the content that they need. So a video with a transcript and captions gives students lots of choices when it comes to how they want to be able to get that kind of content and consume that kind of information. And that way, even students who don't technically need those things may actually prefer them. And you may be one of those people, or you may know someone like that who prefers to read a transcript than watch the video because they want to get a copy of the transcript. They want to highlight it. They want to make notes on it. And this gives students lots of ways to gain information. But if we want to check things like accessibility, we can do that very easily in all of our presentations. And I'm going to set up the accessibility check for the PowerPoint right now after I get it out of slide share mode. There we go. So if I finished creating my PowerPoint and I want to check the accessibility of that PowerPoint, I came into File, and now I am going to check for issues. And under Check for Issues, you can see that accessibility is one of the issues that I can check for. It's this middle choice right now. There we go. And on purpose, there are a lot of accessibility issues here. So the PowerPoint does its accessibility check very, very quickly. And it tells you exactly what's needed in all of these. So it will guide you towards being able to fix what needs to be fixed. So for example, here, here's what it's telling me. These images, PowerPoint doesn't really know what to do about them. They don't have the text that will explain them, and I haven't marked them as decorative if they're decorative. Now, PowerPoint also will tell me right here on the right-hand side how to fix those issues too. So if I want to fix these issues and provide the kind of text that would explain what this is, I can right-click and I can click on Edit Alt Text, and here it is right here. And what PowerPoint wants me to do is just write a few words that explain what this picture is. So I can say, this shows the moderate quiz feature when in Canvas. And then I'm done. I can come here and it wants me to do the same thing. But when I come down here to where I have this picture of a dog, again, you're going to see the same problem. This is not a picture that's been explained, but all I have to do is mark it as decorative, and then that box goes away, and PowerPoint knows that this picture isn't one that contains content that students need to understand. And so I would be going in and adding that kind of alt text for each image if the image was important. So this is the view for scheduling appointments in Canvas, because I just grabbed a screenshot that I had. And as I'm fixing things, my list is getting smaller and smaller because I'm taking care of it. So these were all about issue problems, but this one is about reading order. And so if I go to slide 5, PowerPoint doesn't know how to read this order because PowerPoint doesn't know if a screen reader came in, where to go first. Again, you have all of this to tell you how to fix it. So step by step, slide by slide, PowerPoint is telling me what to do to make this an accessible document. And as I save it along the way, if I put that PowerPoint in Canvas, any student who opens it up will now have an accessible document. Canvas has its own built-in accessibility checkers too. And Oh, Lori's got it. That's a good question. Should I put the graphic in the alt text rather than just saying what it is? And the answer is that no, we can't do it that way, because the alternative text is made for a screen reader, and that screen reader is going to find that picture and then read that description. So alternative text is an accommodation that we put in place for students with visual impairments who can't see. And so the screen reader reads everything for them, and then so it will read the image as well. Now, you did see, and that PowerPoint can offer to kind of do its best job to guesstimate what some of these things were. So if it comes here, I can kind of have PowerPoint try to generate a description, but sometimes PowerPoint won't be able to do it. And even here it says, well, we can't do this. But here I can put, and it's really just one sentence, and then I'm done. But the alt text is specifically text only. If you have a graphic like a table, and if I come back to the table here, once I'm inside PowerPoint, you can see how I actually can write inside the table. I made the table inside PowerPoint, and PowerPoint didn't flag this as one of the problems. It only flagged this picture as part of the problems because it read this without a problem. And you're right, Lori, absolutely. If you say this is a graph, it doesn't say the information that's in the graph. And that's because you have to explain the information in the graph. In that, there's a difference between what's called alternative text, which is just those one or two sentences, and what others call a long description, which would be something that we use for a graph. But if you build the graph in PowerPoint, or if you are using Excel and you're building the graph in Excel where all the cells are located, then you don't have to do all that explaining because the tools are built in to explain it for you, which is why it's better to build in the tools that you're going to be presenting with so that the tools inside those programs can do all of that explaining. Otherwise, you're right, you have to explain, you actually have to explain the data on the graph as well. So it is always better to build in the content in some way than it is to take a screenshot, because the screenshot of information has to be described. This is, again, for students with significant visual impairments. Canvas has its own accessibility checking that I want to show you as well. So if I'm going to stop and switch over to where Canvas is. So if I'm in Canvas and I have my module overview page that I've been working on and I'm in editing mode, then my accessibility checker in Canvas is right here. It's at the very bottom of the rich content editor. And when I click on it, Canvas finds an issue. And so here it is. The tables need a caption that says what the table is. So I can do that. This is a table. And then I can hit apply. And the accessibility checker didn't find any other issues. That was partly because here in my images, it had alt text. And here's why sometimes, the tools are great, but you also have to do some checking on your own, because really, I don't need anything here. I can just click that this is decorative, because the picture of the mouse doesn't really it isn't showing any content. Any place in Canvas that has this rich context editor is going to have that accessibility checker down here at the bottom. And it's also going to have the suggestions for how you can fix it, and fix it within a few steps alongside it. And then when I save it, you can see now when I hover over, there isn't anything there. because I said that was a decorative image. But here's my header that Canvas said I should have. You can check your alt text, because if I change my mind and say that's important, and I describe it, and hit done, and then hit save. Now, if a screen reader came by, when we got to the mouse, it would read, the mouse is looking out of a window. Screen readers now have changed a lot over the years, and there are some kind of rather expensive ones like JAWS, but now Chrome has one that's attached to Chrome. Mac users, there's one attached to Safari as well. So if you're really wanting to check some of these things based on the students in your room, then there are some quick and easy ways that you can check your accessibility. I do want to show you inside quizzes before we just stop for questions. I do want to show you where that moderate quiz is when we're inside of Canvas, like I told you I would. Right here, here's my quiz. Notice that I'm not in editing mode. My quiz is done. Here are my details. It's timed for 90 minutes. Here's how many points it's worth. Here's my moderate quiz. So when I click on moderate this quiz, I have my list of students, and I'm going to click on this pencil right here, because that's going to change just the student. And here's that box for extra attempts or extra time. So that extra time would be time on top of 90 minutes. So if somebody gets double, then I'm putting that extra 90 in there, and it will equal 180. And if they get an extra attempt, I can put it there and then hit save. And now it has updated. So now my test student has 2 attempts left. And I can see when I look at my student roster that now that student, it's been noted, gets an extra 90 minutes on that attempt. So it's a really good way to check very quickly. Those are going to be, working here inside Canvas, those are going to be kind of where the biggest accessibility issues are. And extra time for quizzes, I think, is the #1 that we have. On the Keep Teaching site, we do have kind of a one-page document with tips about accessibility that includes the things that we mentioned today, because that's where I pulled the highlights from. That's where you're going to find out issues about color. There's a link there to the WebAIM color contrast checker. That's where you're going to find where you can look at more about images, where we're going to look at captioning and video and looking at tools in Panopto. And all of that editing in Panopto, where if we want to change our captions, if we can, that's all going to come from entering Panopto on the left-hand side of our Canvas course, and then just jumping into editing. Are there any questions? Okay, if there aren't any questions, then what I want to do is change my screen for just a minute and show you where some of those resources are. I do have a question. If I have a student with an extra time and then I assign a time limit to the quiz for all students, yes, if you have a student who requires extra time, the only way you can give that student extra time is if you put a time limit on that quiz in the first place. So if a student requires extra time, if you have made that time unlimited and there isn't a time limit, then you don't have to worry about the extended time because there was no time limit in the first place, if that makes sense. And we're not really talking about dates when we're talking about extended time. We're talking about a time limit that would then be extended. So that 90 minutes turns into 180 minutes, or an hour turns into an hour and a half. So yes, that box about extending time will not show up if you did not put a time limit on that quiz in the first place. So if no one has a time limit, then it meets accommodations, yes. Yes, if that quiz had been untimed, then you would not have had to do anything. That's why if you're giving a quiz and you want to give it during your class, but you want them to finish it when your class ends, you do have to put a time limit on it so those students who need the extra time get the extra time. But if you've just said you have 2 weeks to take this quiz, but you can take all the time you need when the quiz is open, then that doesn't require any extra time on their part. Here is where I go for accessibility resources. This is WebAIM. They are the gold standard of accessibility resources, and they've been around for a really, really long time. And they have some great built-in tools, and they have some great resources as well. Here's that color contrast checker that I was telling you about. So if I have 2 different colors here, here's what my font looks like, here's what my background looks like. The accessibility checker will show me that right now everything passes. It passes, this is our accessibility standards. If it's normal, if it's large, or even if it's in a box. But if I wasn't sure, so for example, what if this blue was not as blue? What if it was more like that? And here's where you can see the font. You can tell it's not very readable, and the color checker will tell you it's not readable. And you can start, but the nice thing is you can start playing with this and see, okay, well, how dark does it have to be to make it so that it passes right there? That's where it has to be. So it's a nice, quick place to go and check your colors. And then you can just grab this code and copy the code and paste it into Canvas for what your color is supposed to be, and it'll change it. Janita asked, is closed captioning provided for the lectures that we record? The answer is yes, if you put them in Panopto. If they are in Panopto and you upload it into that video repository that we have, and you give it just a little bit of time, the longer the lecture, the longer it will take for the captions to generate. But yes, Panopto will generate captions for your lectures, but I would suggest that you go and check those captions and clean them up and make any changes that you want to make before you show students the video. The clearer that you are, the fewer errors in captioning you'll have. But captions and auto-generated caption makers like Panopto or like YouTube have trouble with jargon. So if you're using acronyms or other kinds of abbreviations, they're going to struggle with that. So those would need to be changed as well. Sometimes they have trouble with things like course numbers. Sometimes they have trouble with titles. So it's good just to run your eyes over it and fix it. It doesn't take a lot of time at all. So yes, put it into Panopto, and then Panopto will take care of it. Any other questions? WebAIM has a lot of other resources as well. I go to them for their color contrast, but they have a lot of good checklists. Here's Wave, which is their accessibility evaluation tool. It's a toolbar that you can put on your browser and it will check websites for you. Ideally, when we're building content with accessibility in mind, because it is a lot harder to go backwards and make everything accessible than it is to build something that is accessible as you go. And so a lot of these places will help you build something that's accessible as you go. They have all sorts of articles as well. They've done some great presentations on the guidelines and the standards and what they mean and why they are important. WebAIM is really kind of like the main place that I go to for accessibility help if I need help with something. What we ask for when we're looking at Quality Matters, as far as accessibility goes, is it readable? Is it presented in multiple ways so that we aren't dependent on one way for students to get information if we're using something like media or if we're using something like an image? And then just remember, Microsoft and Adobe and Canvas already have tools built in to help you and to guide you through making any fixes that you need to make along the way. A lot of times, if you use the standard templates in the tools themselves, you're already building with accessibility in mind. And by that, I mean, if I come over here to my PowerPoint and I add a slide, if you look here, you can see all these click to add titles and click to add text. Those are all set up in a reading hierarchy that PowerPoint understands and that accessibility readers understand. So if I keep this title and then I keep this heading, you can see the fonts change in size. And that even bulleted content remains. So if I stay with all of the boxes the way they are and I work inside of them the way that they're created, then I'm building with accessibility in mind. The way that kind of confuses PowerPoint and some of them would be if I deleted all of this and then deleted that too, and deleted all of the structure that was in that slide, and then I started putting in text boxes and saying, well, I really want something that's right here, and I don't want it to be a title, I don't want it to be a heading, I don't want it to be this either. I'm just going to go pick a whole different font and I'm going to type something here. And you can tell this slide has already popped up as an issue on my accessibility checker because now it doesn't know what I'm doing. Why is this box here? What is it? Is it supposed to go before all of these, after all of these? What do I do with this box? So staying within those settings in PowerPoint and in Word and in Adobe products and in Canvas will help building with accessibility in mind. Canvas has those same kinds of features as well. Same kinds of headings, same kinds of tables. You can build tables in Canvas. Same kinds of all of those features so that an accessibility reader can just take care of it the first time. Are there any other questions? Accessibility can seem a little overwhelming at times, especially at first. And I don't want you to feel like you are overwhelmed or without help. You have ATSDs in all of the schools who can help you and show where these tools are. We also have our online production services staff who can help with accessibility issues as well. And help is really just a help ticket away. And while most of us won't need anything more than the extra time on a quiz or an extra attempt on a quiz, it's nice to know that there are ways to make it so that a wider audience can benefit from the content that you create, because that's really the goal of accessibility, is opening up your content to a wider group of people who could not see it otherwise or couldn't gain as much from it otherwise. And ultimately that's what we want. And then, of course, there's always time to just play with the tools. I play with that color contrast checker quite a bit when I'm trying to nuance things and I want things to look a certain way. Any other questions? We've got about 4 minutes left. Are the resources on Canvas? The accessibility checker resource is on Canvas. It's on every page that you create. It is down at the bottom. If you'd like to just get some of the links, like to WebAIM and the color contrast checker, or if you even want just a copy of some of the things that I did and I pointed to, just reach out to me and I will happily get all of that to you. My email address is jlculver@smu.edu. I'm putting it in the chat now. And I will happily send some of this information your way. Just in the last couple minutes, because I'm always curious about this, because I'm not seeing a lot of questions. Do we have anybody in the room who, when you are watching videos on your own, do you like to just have the subtitles on? Let me see a show of hands, or you can type it in the chat. I do. I like to have them on. Yep, we've got at least one person. Oh, there's some more. I know I'm never completely alone in that. This is kind of why accessibility is benefits even a wider group of people than intended. The captions really weren't intended for me, but I really benefit from them. And especially when I'm watching shows where a lot is happening really, really quickly, there are times when I pause it and I really want to read what's going on. Or if I'm watching something on BritBox and somebody's got a really, really thick Scottish accent and I'm not picking up the words, then the subtitles are on so I can have a better understanding of what's going on. So yeah, we always find a few people who have those subtitles on too. Some studies have shown that quite a few of us get those subtitles and read those transcripts and that we benefit from them. Okay. Well, I want to thank all of you for being here today and spending an hour with me as we talk about how to make content and make our assessments more accessible to all of our students. Please let us know as you're working on both your content and your assessments if there's anything that we can do to help in that regard. And hopefully you'll be tuning in for the very next set. Thank you for your time.